Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. Once again, it's James, your host. Folks, when I tell you I get excited about podcasts, this today is a big one for me because I had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman in Austin recently, and for the first time, I got to try the Carnivore Bar. We have the CEO of Carnivore Bar in the house today, Mr. Phillip Meece. Welcome to Carnivorist Chats, my friend.
James, thanks for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. And Philip, I'll just go back to say, I told you offline that the wait was worth it for me. These bars are delicious. I held one up earlier and I'm holding one in my hand here now, but they saved me on the flight back home for the first time. And I bought my box there and I'm going to continue to be a subscriber. Well done on this product, Philip.
So glad you like it. I mean, you holding that up in the airport is like perfect. That's exactly what I made it for. It's like not having to compromise when you're traveling, when you're in those vulnerable situations, being able to eat what you want to eat according to plan and not according to the whim of our travel itinerary. Like that's the heart and soul of what I made this product for.
It really is. And we all know airport food is predominantly garbage and it's overpriced garbage. So
Yeah.
they really they know they've got you by you know what, and they just charge whatever they do. And so it was just awesome to be able to have this Carnivore Bar first thing in the morning when I got on the plane, and I was good for my whole day. It was a long day of travel back to Bermuda, but it was awesome.
Yeah, and just to be real, like there are airport solutions. There are like you can do boiled eggs. You can get a little piece of cheese. If there's McDonald's, you can get just the patties because they're all beef. So it's like you can make it work, but it kind of sucks because one of the things that all of those travel options have in common is low fat. So, they're relatively low fat. They're not, they're not fat free, but on the order of spectrum, if you're eating 80% of your calories from fat, if you're eating keto carnivore, as a lot of us like transitioned from this high fat modality, ribeyes and fat, extra fat, and like don't you dare trim that off of my New York strip. And it's like, you're going for that fat when you go to the grocery store, when you go to your butcher, you go to your regenerative rancher, you're getting like these awesome cuts, and then you're relegated to just jerky and plain patties or a boiled egg. It's like you don't feel your best. It's because you're basically taking all the energy out of that. It's like you're getting great amino acids, and it's like maybe lower quality, but you're still getting them. And the missing component is this like bar of high fat. And it's like if you could just put this in my carry-on, trip would be so much better.
Looking at vending machines, and I even looked in airports for a while. And once I turned carnivore, because as my listeners know, it basically healed me and saved my life. Is looking at the jerky options, and there's the bags of Jack Links and all that stuff, but they don't have the fat that you need to sustain you. I would eat a bag of those, and because of the high salt content and other oils and stuff in them, I would be hungry 15 minutes later. But with this beauty, I'm telling you, I was good. I was good for the whole flight home. It was fantastic.
And it's that high saturated fat that signals leptin that actually makes you feel full. It's like it's what I wanted as a soldier. I can't make the mission any less terrible. I cannot make war better, but I can make this part of war better. I cannot be hungry. And that was my dream. It's like if I make it back from my deployment in Afghanistan, I'm gonna fix this food thing because I'm tired of MREs. It's not real food. It doesn't get the job done. It's like, there's got to be a better way to get healthy food to the battlefield without loading it up with sugar, preservatives, and crap.
I understand from listening to you speak before that you were a medic in the Army. So we really appreciate your service, and talk to us a little bit about that. How did this come about for you? And I know we talked offline a second ago about our similar journeys in being hit with a lot of antibiotic use and gut dysbiosis as sort of the foundational approach of what happened to you and spurred you on later down the line to create this bar. But talk to us about your journey in the Army and what you found when you were overseas.
It was my pleasure to serve. I felt like my country's given me a lot, and I wanted to give back, earn my citizenship, so to speak, rather than take it for granted. And in that effort, I found this opportunity to be a combat medic, and I was like, well, what does it mean to be a combat medic? And Fort Sam Houston, there's a great program with AMED. It's like the military medical division that has all the doctors, nurses, cooperates with corpsmen, which is like the medic for the Marines. And the Marines see a lot of the roughest combat, but like the Army medics are one of the biggest jobs in the military besides infantry. So infantry is the biggest, and the second biggest is the combat medic, who goes right alongside the infantry, our brothers and sisters, trying to make sure that they're healthy. I want to make sure that I kind of represent the mission of being a medic. Well, it's this idea that you want to conserve the fighting force with the combat arms. Their job is to shoot, move, and communicate. Those are like their three values. And with every other body of Army jobs or MOSs, like they all have different focuses, and ours is to conserve the fighting force. And so in support of the main unit's objective to shoot, move, and communicate and to be an effective team, we have to look for hazards. And sometimes it's not always a bullet wound or an explosion or act of violence. It's field sanitation. It's dealing with waste properly. It's making sure that we have healthy living environments, that we have sleeping quarters that are properly designed, that like someone gets exposed to an IED, like we put them on 24 hours bed rest, because the mild traumatic brain injury says that it's that repeated exposure that tends to cause severe injuries when it comes to brain trauma. So it's like you want to create a safe space for them to recover so they can get back out in the fight. You want to make sure that they have a sanitary living conditions so that they don't get sick and fall ill and are unable to fight. And so when I was dealing with bullet wounds and burns, abrasions, like a lot of those different things, it struck me how many of my soldiers were in a degraded state of health. Like just they started here, and then as the year went on, they got worse and worse and worse, and they weren't sleeping, they weren't digesting their food. A lot of people had constipation, a lot of people had basically diarrhea, dysentery. It's like, so they come to me and they're like, well, doc, make this symptom go away. Here's a little red pill when you need to go, here's a little brown pill when you need to stop. Because as you can imagine, like going out on foot on a foot patrol in Afghanistan, you don't want to be having either one of these problems. Well, give me a pill, make the problem go away. And there's water, electrolyte balances, like making sure that soldiers drink water. It's like our constant anthem as a combat medic: take a knee, drink water. And it's annoying how often that actually helps. But when it comes to like the basics of their food, I think we've really underserved the people on the front lines. So that was kind of my goal, is like, how can we do better? The MRE is this wonderfully designed product that fits all the theoretical needs of the soldier, and it's like in this really encased, like hardened, tested, millions and millions of dollars of research into this food that checks all the boxes on a spreadsheet and is nearly indestructible, impossible to pop. Right? So it's like this great wrapper and this great like government testing protocol, but it's non-digestible. And this is normal people, normal healthy people, not just carnivores, not just like dietary snowflakes. It is your regular average Joe doesn't do well on it multiple days in a row. And they make these mass MREs, the UGRE. MRE just stands for meal ready to eat. I forgot what UGR stands for, except gross. You pull this like rip cord, and then it heats up this giant tray of what presumably is like vegetarian lasagna. It's like, this is not food. And so it comes with bags of candy. Everyone grabs the candy, throws away the rest. The candy is at least digestible. There's no nutrition in it. guaranteed no nutrition, but it's tasty and digestible. And so credit where credit is due. We'll take the candy and cigarettes, please. Hold the gut stopping peanut butter and paste and preservative laden crap. And that's not a good way to live. Like we got home cooked, like not home cooked, but like the army cooks did their absolute best on base. They were creative geniuses that were like an oasis of decent food. Not great, not terrible, but decent. So every time we got to stop at a real base, we got real food. But my unit was an anti-tank unit. The Taliban don't have any tanks. So we were just farmed out to all the random odd jobs in Afghanistan, just kind of forgotten in the lost corner of the AO. And blissfully, that meant that there was less action where we were. So, we got to be thankful there. But there was also worse conditions. We had a general tell us that we were living in some of the worst conditions in Afghanistan of any unit, just because we were a tiny, tiny little unit of basically not very useful tools. And you want to have a full complement if you're going to war. You want to have every tool, but if you have a million screws and a hammer, the hammer just gets tossed in the back. It's like, well, I'll have you in case I need you. You're going to deploy, but you're not really going to be shooting any tanks on the battlefield. And so, given that situation, it kind of heightened the fact that these units in the field don't have a healthy field ration. They have awesome cooks who do their best when they're in base, but when they're out in the field, they're relying on the MRE, and they're overly reliant on that MRE, which is designed to survive the battlefield. It is not designed to nourish the soldier. It is full of these non-bioavailable like rocks, like minerals in their forms that are not bioavailable. They work for that spreadsheet, for that government checklist, but they do not work to actually sustain the human body. And the part of the problem is that it has to survive in these connexes overseas. So there's all this heat, there's all this time, there's all this duration, there's all these different forces acting on this food. Like anything that can survive the trip is almost guaranteed to be non-nutritive.
Philip, it's so interesting to hear you talk about this because there are some brilliant minds in the US military. Make no mistake. Why haven't, in your opinion, why haven't they really thought about this and especially with your experiences, where are we now in terms of when you've talked to your friends that may be still in the military? Where are they looking at?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure exactly where they are. I know there are special forces operatives who, especially in the SEALs, where they have a lot to do with breath control. Navy divers. It's like they're serious performance athletes, and keto has allowed them to extend their breath time. Because if you're processing ketones, beta oxidation, you're more metabolically efficient. That's really really helpful when holding your breath is is that important to what you do in your job. So there are fringes in the special forces, just like there was inroads with CrossFit with special forces, modifying and updating like fitness standards. It's like push-ups, run, sit up is probably not all you need to be able to do on the battlefield. And making more appropriate fitness challenges for the soldier athlete kind of in mind. So there is headway, but you're working with a giant institution that's older than the government, because the army was there before there was any kind of governance. It was like we were a resistance force against the British. 1775, I think, is the official founding of the army. And it's like that is like way before everything else, because we started as a rebellion. So if you think about that tradition, it's very, very old. It's very, very archaic. It takes a long time for us to update that model. And we'll have Army regulations, AR. It's like AR, number, alphabet, soup. And if you read the intent of all the ARs, you get this beautiful vision of everything going into its place, the perfect order. Everything is meticulously thought out. There's even an AR says that you shouldn't be eating MREs for more than 21 days in a row, never mind a whole year. They have this beautiful vision, but then the real world hits. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. I think that's Tyson. And it's so true. And so how do you compromise with the realities on the battlefield, with the realities in your life? It's like, where do you break? And so that's a place where the Army has this beautiful idea, but it has mismatched funding. Gadgets get a lot more attention than like buildings and food and like clothes and just like the basics. But the basics win wars. It's food and water and bullets that we do better than everyone else. That's literally what makes the difference. It's not like our warriors are more fierce. It's that everyone else doesn't have the logistics supply that America does. And so to take something that is working seemingly so well and pick at the very core of it and say, actually, these bullets and beans, great if you didn't use a legume. It's like, like, so you're hitting at the core of what has made us historically successful. But in the Revolutionary War, for example, like a pound of meat was a daily ration for a soldier. Is a great recreationist, Townsend, that like recreates all these different things in the Revolutionary period, and he makes pemmican and he does all these different things. And a pound of meat was a daily ration for a soldier, or salt cured pork. So these preservation methods were really integral to battlefield, success, to success in general for the entire campaign. And that's where we hit another obstacle, which ties in very well with your story of dysbiosis, because malaria is such a predominant predator of armies that sickle cell anemia is our evolutionary response to the prevalence of malaria. It's harder to get malaria if you are heterozygous for sickle cell. And it's like, you don't get an evolutionary response to a disease unless that disease has killed countless millions of your species. And so when we go to an area that's endemic to malaria, we all take these prophylactics against malaria. And mine was doxycycline. So it was a broad spectrum antibiotic that wiped me out. And so that's a baseline of then eating this ration that was not particularly bioavailable. So a 1-2 punch, as a medic, I'm trying to be a good example. I took every pill. Smart soldiers took 2 or 3 pills, got sick, said, I'm done with it. I would rather just die of malaria. And they turned out a lot better throughout their yearly experience than I did. But, that's a mixed message for a medic. You want to try to do the right thing. You want to be a medical example of obeying like your commands and the orders that are given from your superiors. But at the same time, you also have to have the autonomy of your health and do what's right for your body.
I'm just thinking about that, Philip. That is such a crazy situation to be in, because inherently what you're taking down is destroying your gut microbiome, and you're not feeling better. In fact, we can get into sort of how you felt when you left after all this antibiotic use. But as you so succinctly said, you have to be seen to be doing the right thing, especially in the military, because you're leading by example. And you as a medic, definitely, okay, well, this is what we need, fellas. This is it. Wow, crazy. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I'm a specialist, but on a lot of the bases I was at, I was the senior medical person. So that's an E4. That's like enlisted, base rank, no stripes, just a weird little shield thing. And so as an E4, if you're the senior medical person on base, you're trying to set a good example for soldiers in the field that, are looking up to you for medical advice. I had commander, ask me, is this a medevac? So you're talking directly to the command of the base and making these decisions that are important for, okay, this person needs a helicopter, this person doesn't. They're looking to you to be this example. And it's not like malaria hasn't killed, tens of thousands of soldiers. In the Panama Canal, when we were digging that thing, we almost gave up because of how many casualties we had because of malaria, because it was a tropical environment. But Afghanistan is a mixed, environment. You got desert, you got mountains, you got lots of mixed terrain. And unfortunately, they just kind of blanketed it, the prescription for everyone. And, those consequences came with it.
One of the things I heard you said, the biggest killer in war is the nutritional deficiencies on the battlefield. And we can sort of talk about now what happened to you after that prophylactic use of those antibiotics. What happened to you as you sort of came out of the army and was heading home?
Sure. And to qualify that statement, to earn it, so to speak, I'm including a lot of the mental health diagnoses. So PTSD is a label that I got stuck with that I don't feel was appropriate. But, who am I to tell a doctor, I don't think that's the root cause. I think it has something to do with my inability to digest food. Because I'm feeling in my body, I'm feeling wrecked. And I'm like, gosh, there's something wrong. And I can't focus. I have brain fog. And so they gave me methylphenidate. So that is Ritalin. So that's meth, that's speed. So
Wow.
if you can imagine, like I have dysbiosis and I'm like, man, I need help focusing. And they're like, okay, well, here, we'll give you this prescription. And I tested positive for ADHD, adult onset ADHD, because of the dysbiosis. Like I legitimately failed the tests. So no one's giving me special treatment or just like pill mill. They assessed me, I failed. And so then they gave me the corresponding drug. But it wasn't the root cause. But it made my anxiety just out of this world explode. I couldn't recover from my workouts. I gained a bunch of weight and I felt miserable. And I was still no closer to solving the issue. But a lot of soldiers turn to alcohol. And so they're in this dysbiotic state where they can't digest their food. They don't have any of the neurotransmitters that lead to the feeling of well-being. So they experience dysphoria and depression because you make that out of amino acids. If the pH in your gut is messed up, you can't break down the meat. And if you're a good little soldier like me and eating lots of vegetables, it's interfering in that pH even further. So you can't break down the meat to make the neurotransmitters to feel well. And so that primes everyone for alcoholism, primes everyone for a PTSD label, whether or not they meet the criteria or not, whether or not they experience real trauma or not. That gets into semantics of like what's real. It's like everyone's subjective. You can be traumatized by not getting your favorite juice when you're 6, or having a friend die in your arms. It's like your perception becomes your reality when it comes to your mind. And so when you prime someone in this sick state, it's much easier for those little misadventures or the loss of a relationship or small setbacks to become cataclysmic setbacks to someone who doesn't have the resilience to handle life. And so we have a statistic nowadays. I think it's up to 22 veterans a day kill themselves. They check out. And so one of the reasons I think that nutrition is the leading cause of death is because we kill ourselves, at 1,000 to 1, the enemy kills us. We just check out. We're highly trained, uh, good at what we do, but we don't have any reason to stay in the fight. We don't believe in what we're doing. We have dysbiosis on top of that, and we're miserable. And so I do think we need to not be in pointless wars. I do think we need to go where we're sent on purpose to accomplish a real task and to better the world that we're in. On top of that, I think we also need to not treat our soldiers as disposable, because there's a real problem refilling the rank and file, because the people we're bringing in now to the army are falling apart. Their bones are brittle. They've only played video games. They've never played sports. We're having 18-year-olds with hip fractures. Tim Kennedy talks about this in length on the Joe Rogan podcast. He said there's no one to select for special forces because no one's fit enough. Everyone's doing weed. Everyone's on drugs. Everyone's doing all these different things, none of which lead to providing fit soldiers for the battlefield. It's like, war machine aside, we do need to be healthy enough as a population that if there is an existential threat, I can think of a couple that are brewing right now, that we're prepared to meet that challenge, that we're prepared to defend our families, that we're prepared to defend our neighbors. It's like civilizationally, we don't want everyone to be so sick that they are effectively helpless. And as an American, I think that's kind of where we're leading. We're leading to this degraded state where everyone cares about the cost of things and they're taking for granted the heavy costs in their health.
I'm sitting here and I'm just in awe because speaking with you, my brain's going a million miles a minute. And because I told you about my journey into veganism, destroying my gut initially with antibiotics, as you did, and how I became depressed, so anxious, losing weight. And I'm just starting to think about the countless number of soldiers, as you said, that have suffered similarly to you, and the agenda now being pushed away from meat to all the grains and plant-based ways of eating, when ultimately it was the change on what we put in our mouths that caused us to heal. And I know you're very much like me. My story was I found a lady by the name of Sally Kane Norton who presented at KetoCon online. And when she started talking about the plant toxins, as Dr. Chafee so eloquently talks about too, plants are trying to kill you, I started to realize I may have been doing this all wrong. And I had been bombing my gut with the highest oxalate plants for years. For years, spinach smoothies, chia seeds, kale, blending them up, you name it. My gut was just a wreck. And then I did the deep dive because then once I figured that out, I found Dr. Baker. I found who you're about to talk about next, who is Jordan Peterson. And it ties back into a recent guest who I'm not sure if you're aware of, but his name is Brett Lloyd. He's a coach as well. And he cured his lifelong depression by finding Jordan Peterson and Dr. Baker. So please talk to us about that discovery for yourself as well. It's very powerful.
On my 10-year journey, health journey, trying to figure out what went wrong, I didn't like the diagnosis that the VA gave me. And so I set about trying to better myself and figure out what was wrong with my depression. So initially I found Peterson for the self-help reasons, how about you clean your room? How about you not be so useful? It's find some great suffering in the world and maybe, I don't know, reduce it. And I was like, okay, that's not too out there. That's pretty reasonable. It's I could pick up my clothes. I could do the laundry. I could shave. I could maybe drink a little less. I could just take these small steps towards not wallowing in my depression and cynicism of oh, the army messed me up and it's all their fault. And, I'm this helpless victim. It's wait a sec, maybe, I've tilted in that for a few years. I found it displeasurable. And, so I'm okay, maybe I take this other approach. Maybe I take some responsibility and try to figure things out. From there, I heard about Michaela's story on Joe Rogan again. I'm a big fan. 37 different affected joints, rheumatoid arthritis, idiopathic rheumatoid arthritis, falling apart, depression, had a hip replacement, ankle replacement, amazing story. And then Peterson himself had depression, had anxiety, couldn't get up in the morning, and he lost 70 pounds that he didn't know he had to lose. He's maybe 20, 30, but then 70 is he is rail thin now, but presumably doing much better. And that's just amazing because he's eating meat and veggies before he went carnivore. So he's eating paleo. And so, cutting out the veggies, why would that help? And same with Michaela, she was eating meat and broccoli and then got pregnant and was I'm cutting the broccoli and then did better. And it's as a medic, knowing what I know about birth and the encephalization and the neurotube as a developing fetus, it's if you were deficient in vitamins and nutrients, that is a very dangerous time in the life of every human. As you're developing and your stem cells are differentiating into their different levels, it's if you were lacking something in your diet, that's going to be apparent in the offspring. It's it's not a guarantee that but it is certainly a vulnerable position. And so I'm amazed that you have people on, not pure carnivore, but mostly carnivore birth stories and people who've been doing this 10, 20 years. I'm that's crazy. Don't you need to eat your vegetables? And I'm pounding vegetables in tropical fats because I'm trying to eat like high fat, but lots of vegetables, and then some like grass-fed, grass-finished beef, because that did make me feel better. But I was eating it on these giant beds of salad. And I'm like, oh, crap. So not only can you thrive and live without vegetables, like people like Sally Norton with the oxalates and the anti-nutrients. Paul Mason did a great talk at Carnivore Conference about anti-nutrients in plants. Plants are trying to kill you. That just synced up with what I know about evolutionary biology so well. Like everything is trying to live. Everything wants to live, and everything has a strategy to, animals run, plants have chemical defenses, tubers, which are less toxic, are buried under the ground, you cannot see them. It's like everything has a way to defend itself. It's not just serving itself on a platter. Fruit, being the only exception, wants to be eaten by animals to deposit their seeds in their feces, and then you get fat for winter. It's like, wait a second, well, I don't want to be in a perpetual winter. I don't want to like perpetually be getting fattened up. It's like, maybe I don't need any of this. If you think about what is in it for me, it's like, well, the fats, the essential fatty acids, the essential amino acid, and there aren't essential carbohydrates. So it's like, wow, so I can live off of this. And then the immediate problem I had was travel. And so my experience in 2018 like dovetailed right into the Carnivore Bar Kickstarter in 2019. I was just like, smooth transition. It's like, great. I found a new way to live. My anxiety lifted, my depression melted away. And then I was like, oh my gosh, wait, but I can't leave my kitchen because they're going to use seed oil on all these surfaces and I'm going to react. Like, okay, so I got to figure this out. I made pemmican like religiously in my own kitchen. I was like, oh, this is a lot of time. There's got to be a way. Like, would any other carnivores like me to do this? And so we launched a Kickstarter. The rest is history.
We're going to get into the actual bar and the iterations that you started out with and how the challenges that arose from creating a product like this in a second. But as you were talking, Philip, I was thinking about often as a prior vegan, people ask me, was there a lot of, cognitive dissonance when I came back to eating that first bite of meat again after 6+7 years? And sure, there was. But do you know the harder thing for me was conceptually not having any plant food whatsoever on my plate? That was the harder part. I was just
Yeah.
getting rid of the vegetables in their entirety. But once I did that, oh man, like Dr. Chafee says, superhuman time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the proof is really it's in the results. It's how you feel. Like, don't take our word for it. Like listen to your own body and within reason. Like, obviously when you have a hyper palatable like processed food, it does taste good. But don't just listen to that first second and ignore the whole rest of the day that follows. It transpires. It's like when you listen to your body and you're eating a carnivore way of eating, or at least animal based, like you feel so much better. It's like this relief, this persistent, I don't know, how would you describe it? I'm thinking like tranquility.
The carnivore zen. People talk about it
Yeah.
all the time. It's amazing what happened. Philip, I'm not kidding when I tell you, like, I was up constantly during the night. My brain was waking me up. I was anxious. I was depressed. And about a couple of months into the carnivore diet, that depression lifted. The anxiety for some reason takes a little bit longer, but once that lifted, I kid you not, life can throw whatever, and life's throwing a lot at me right now. If I was still vegan, I tell you, I would probably be institutionalized. Seriously.
Yeah.
But now
You
I'm
just
like,
crumble.
okay, I'm just going to keep eating my meat and drinking my water and keep loving life. It's an incredible thing when you experience it. And I know for you, you were like me. I was full of brain fog. I could hardly do the tasks at my job. But you even talked about, your brain fog lifting, your mood elevating once you got that Zen state.
I don't know what I would have done job wise. Like it was like pulling teeth for me to do anything. I got slower and slower and slower. And my digestion got worse and worse and worse. Um, I eventually decided the speed wasn't for me. I left the Ritalin at home and I was like, that's not good for me. I would do a workout and then I'd be so sore. I'd be sore for like 2 weeks straight from one workout. And I'm like, I am too stressed. Like I don't think I'm overtrained, but I'm broken somehow. Like this is not normal. I can't stay inflamed and have this kind of soreness just in my body. Like that's too much inflammation. I knew that intuitively, but I didn't know what else I should be doing. Um, but yeah, for me, I bit off a little bit more than I can chew with the carnivore bar, if I'm being honest. But that zen and that enthusiasm for life and that energy is what made me dare to take it on. You know, from the very origins of our humble beginnings on Kickstarter, just a concept, um, to a full-fledged company. I would have never dreamed to take on something like that. It just 6 months prior, I was so meek and so defeated and so downtrodden by the way I felt, by the way my brain felt, that it was just not something I would even consider. And then that veil parted, and I was like, oh wow, there's life to live. There's a reason to live it. And it's like, for me, like I was never going to be without that again. And taking pemmican on the go was how I was going to maintain that.
And we are so thankful that you found this way and created this bar, because it is delicious. So let's get into that. I heard you say that you want to create a healthy food that is energy dense for those people who don't have time to eat healthy. But in so doing, you found out sort of the hard way, and I commend you for it again, that the process can be tricky. So talk to us about the nuances with making the bar. I learned a lot listening to you, so I love for you to share that.
Start with the parfleche. This is a Native American food. I tell anyone who will listen that this is rawhide, that they would take a mortar and pestle. They would dry out typically bison, and the Plains Native Americans would smoke it, dry it by sun, break it down with mortar and pestles to get it pulverized to like a dust, like blow apart that dry. And then they would take the fat and they'd render it not too hot, because you don't want to scorch it, because there's it's grass fed, grass finished. It has all these fragile fats in it with the tallow, with the high heat stable fats. So it's this complex like bouquet of fatty acids and nutritions and fat soluble vitamins that are rendered down very gently. You have to cut up the fat to an immense degree. We have grinders at the carnivore bar, but like if you don't get the fascia or the encapsulation out, it can take like 3 days to render if you don't do that, versus like 8 hours if you do it the right way. And so you have to balance the heat, you have to balance the fascia, the encapsulation. You have to source it from the right part of the animal. It has to be mostly suet or kidney fat, which has higher content of the vitamins and nutrients, but it's also a little firm. So you need some back fat, some intramuscular fat, so that you get the flavor, but not too much because it's too soft. And so you need like this blend of these different fatty acids to make like a solid bar, a bar that's firm, but not too soft, and not so firm that it's like wax. So you want this careful blend in this immaculately dried product. We only use beef from Joyce Farms because I found that it tasted the best, and they had a program that's big enough to scale with us. I wanted to get something from the States for supply chain and resiliency reasons. I wanted something that I could see the supply chain and it wasn't coming from halfway across the world, and didn't have a lot of extraneous inputs like grain finished cattle do. They had higher need for antibiotics, higher need for all these different medicines, and they have the grain, which has fields of monocultured death, Monsanto infused death, that go into the feed that then feed the cow to make it fat so that it's bloated with water. It's like, you're killing my margins here. It's like, and delivering a less nutritious product. So I just can't do it. I did try that for some of the eat the meat you can afford crowd, but the metrics just didn't work out. So we started originally wanting to do regenerative agriculture. Now we only do regenerative agriculture. We're back to our roots on that. And we try to keep with that ancestral, heritage of nothing added, because the lessons of the MRE I still feel in my body, the scars of that horrible digestion. It's the preservatives don't stop working just because you put them in your body. the microbes that help you break down your food, break down those amino acids, absorb the chyme and the emulsified fatty acids. Like that's bile salts, that's your gallbladder, your liver, your pancreas. It's like all of that works in concert, and preservatives interfere. They work in concert with the microbiome to create metabolites that you can absorb into your bloodstream. So if I added something to make it cheaper, to make it faster, to make it more efficient, to make it more profitable, it's like then I'd be invalidating the reason that I created it in the first place as a carnivore. Because I want to be able to get the same nutrition as if I'm biting into a steak, but I want the convenience of a bar. So God forbid I get sent back to Afghanistan, but I could, in theory, send this to future me to prevent myself from having the same problems that I had in the past. Because when I got a really clean jerky sent overseas to Afghanistan without preservatives, without soy sauce and wheat and sugar and other bullshit added on top, it's spoiled. Because a clean jerky, the heat contractions of the desert and the Connex and the shipping container as it went overseas takes several months to get there, but it was completely soured. The moisture had come out of the meat, because if you make it too dry, you can't bite into it. It's shoe leather. So pemmican is this creative solution that's thousands of years old that is designed for this pre-refrigeration, combat world, where what if you don't have a refrigerator? What if you don't have a supply chain? What if you don't have support and you're out in the world and you need something nutrient dense and energy dense to survive off of? It's like that is the world of pemmican that was created for however many thousands of years ago. So when we try to replicate it without humility, with hubris, and make a jerky without all these preservatives, we run into this immediate problem where if it's dry enough, it's not edible. And if it's edible, then it's not dry enough. And basically all that moisture condensed on the bag and then soured the whole thing. So I spent my own money on this clean jerky, sent to Afghanistan. It's spoiled because of mold, because it was too wet.
I was thinking about that, and as it sort of segues into the wrapper that you came up with for the carnivore bar, excuse me, there it is right there. Understanding and learning from you, the two biggest threats to pemmican are oxygen and water. So how does your wrapper help those problems?
So we're actually upgrading our wrapper. This is our current, and this is our new. This is still in prototype phase, but essentially it's like you can see the edge of that right there.
Yes.
That's a metallized film. So effectively like Mylar space age technology to make sure that there's absolutely 0 grams of oxygen and 0 grams of moisture going into the package over a span of years. Because I want to prove shelf stability for 25 years. So we're still waiting on funding for that test, but we basically put it in a microwave, like accelerated conditions room for 4 years. The company's only 3 years old. And then they extrapolate from that data. They'll test it every month and see how it's doing. And they'll extrapolate to the 25 years. If you do the math, it can't accumulate that oxygen and moisture, because if it did, then it'd go over the minimum water activity for mold and the minimum, water activity for bacteria, and the oxygen permeability, excuse me, would rancidify the fats. And so if you've made jerky and you've put it in a Ziploc bag, or you made pemmican and put it in a similar like over-the-counter bag, you realize that 1 or 2 days, whatever you put in there is pretty fresh. And if you want to make it even fresher, you put it in the freezer. But if you want long-term shelf stability, you need something that has a little bit more oomph. You need something that has a little bit more of a barrier, because we look at all this plastic and we're like, it's the same, plastic A is the same as plastic B. It's like, well, no, they're different levels of endocrine disruptors. There's different levels of off-gassing. There's different levels of permeability. And so, all our plastic breaks down into like microplastics, and it doesn't necessarily go away, but it breaks down. And so with UV light and moisture. So we want to create a barrier that's really going to, last the test of time. And so that people can put it in their bag, forget about it, and eat it many years later, and it's perfectly fine. It's not changed at all. All the nutrition is preserved. All the energy is preserved. So God forbid, apocalypse or desert island, you'd actually need to survive off a shelf-stable food. You have something other than cheesy poofs and Mountain Dew to subsist on.
Oh man, I can't even imagine surviving off that. And some folks would be stockpiling that. And I don't want to touch on this point too, Philip, because what I thought was interesting was, we all remember too clearly the events of the past couple of years, and you were launching your product ostensibly during this time. And I heard, obviously people, when they realized that there's this shelf stable, nutritiously dense product, that you were even offered Bitcoin and stuff for people to buy in bulk. But you want to just make sure it's available for everyone, which is very commendable.
It's very interesting, the pandemic and the different position that it put me in, because ultimately our problem from inception has been selling out. So the bar is kind of priced not to sell. and that's not out of cruelty. It is based off of rampantly increased costs. And I want to provide this as a lifeline to the people who need it, whose lives depend on this kind of food. There are people who take this into the hospitals, cancer patients, survivors who have no other options, who cannot find a clean food for any price. And, I always want it to be available. I never want to be sold out. And I'm at constant risk of being sold out. So it's how to balance all these different forces, pay the people who make it a living wage, and so that I can trust them, so that they'll make it to the standard that I believe is really critical and important. As a carnivore myself, I'm eating this product, and if we mess up, then we're messing up me as well as my customer, which is unacceptable both times. So there's only so much wiggle room I have for compromise. Everybody who has offered to help me starts and ends with, how can we use cheaper ingredients and cut corners to cut costs? How can we sell waste products as just as good as the real product? How can we diminish the size of it? How can we shrinkflate? How can we make it so that what their customer is getting is just branding and identity and not value and quality? And the idea of the carnivore bar is exactly opposite of any kind of sense of profitability whatsoever, unfortunately for me. But it's concentrated value. There's absolutely no moisture in it. There's no water in it, because that is how it functions. And what you're getting is concentrated value at the highest quality ingredients I could possibly find anywhere. So it's raw honey, it's Redmond real salt. I just included a version with Pluck, which is like a chef crafted organ blend, grass finished organs from New Zealand, which are immaculately, prepared and dried, and so that they marry with the concept of the carnivore bar. And then we come from Joyce Farms, regenerative agriculture, grass-fed, grass-finished, that's sequestering carbon in the soil. It's all about resilience, regeneration, and investing in your health and investing in your survival. Now, when you frame it that way, it's like, well, that seems pretty valuable. But it's so funny that everyone is just kind of ingrained, when they think bar, they want to pay $1 for a granola bar that has 90% margin. So it's 10 cents of sugar and oats and a little bit of chocolate flavored sugar mixed together, and it costs $1, but it costs them 10 cents to make it, less than like a cent for the wrapper, and then less than 9 cents for the actual ingredients. And then they make 80 to 90 cents per bar. And so that is how food industry works. Doing it this way, I'm completely dependent and ingratiated by all the people who want to invest in this product continuing. As we scale up, we can lower the cost, but it's a tough proposition in a world that has seen like 300% increases in meat costs from a producer level. and 600% increase in labor costs just to get the high quality people who have families they need to support, who are going to do it the right way, because there's no point in making contaminated carnivore bar. A contaminated carnivore bar is not worth 80% of a carnivore bar. It's worth zero, because a contaminated carnivore bar is not a carnivore bar. And so with that as like our baseline of we cannot compromise, we are put in this weird position. And because of that, it's just been an interesting roller coaster. I have no other way of describing it, but I'm so, so grateful for people like you, for our fans, for our customers, people who believe in no compromise, that they want to make this investment, because I think our future depends on it.
People, as I'm sure you have found out, are willing to purchase quality, and Carnivore Bar is quality made, as you said, both in terms of the standards by which it's produced, the ingredients that are in it, especially for folks like you and I are coming to the carnivore way for healing. Clean ingredients, things that won't trigger any sort of autoimmune issues for them. Like I had in my hand here, I have the unsalted, but I'm a big fan of the salted, but they had run out. Those sold out quick at KetoCon. So
They did.
but you can always add your own salt on top, as the lady who was
Right.
manning the booth so eloquently said. I was like, yeah, of course, that makes good sense. What I also like about you, Philip, is that you are now meeting people where they're at. And because even though I'm an advocate of the carnivore way of eating, so many people are at different stages of their journey. And one of the reasons I heard you say this is because you talked about adding honey into your bars, and it was sort of the pill that you could swallow. But it's such an important thing, because people may not want to go that. They may want a little sweet taste. They may just have this really affinity for honey and believe in its nutritional value. But I like that you're adding things like pluck. And how is the pluck, the garlic that was in my VIP bag, by the way, and the barbecue I saw at KetoCon? How are those being received?
So there are people who are pure carnivores who only want, beef, salt, water. That is it. And we provide that bar, and we will hold the salt for the ultra purists who are sodium sensitive. We want to have the core of our business be this pure carnivore food. But people who are low carb, who are animal based, they want a little flavor. And I think ultimately, if we can have them eat more animal based, if we can have them eat more animal based nutrition, they'll be better off. So, when it comes to honey, that's a controversial subject for me personally. I react to honey. Like my dysbiosis, honey is a bad idea for me. So, like, I'm loving people where they are and fully admitting that that's not where I'm at. Like for me, I am, doing SIRS testing with nutrition with Judy. I'm still on my health journey. I have not arrived. I'm not in carnivore heaven. I'm diligently on the path of self-discovery and recovering what I lost. But a lot of people who are more active, who are metabolically healthy, who are fit, there's no anti-nutrients in honey besides the fructose. If your liver can handle the fructose, it's like having a glass of some kind of alcohol with low sulfites or low contaminants or no gluten. It's like, I'm not the diet police. As a manufacturer, I have to make what sells, but I have to add in my own ethos. And my ethos is 7 grams of honey, 7 grams of carbohydrates from that honey, with a 400 calorie bar, 420 calories for the honey bar. You're going to get full before you're out of ketosis, hopefully. Some people mark that carb tolerance differently, 20 grams or 50 grams, but like the idea was 50 grams. And fructose is lower and your insulin spiking anyway. And instead of degrading the shelf stability like fruit would have, honey actually increases the shelf stability because it's antimicrobial. So if I'm handing this to a soldier and they want processed food flavors, this is my way of sneaking in more animal-based nutrition. And pluck has organs. Pluck has organs in it. So James, the chef who created pluck, has this blend of organs. So when I have a zesty garlic, which is 0 carb, that's nose to tail nutrition plus spices if you can handle them, and then our honey barbecue is like our favorite. our crowd favorite. So the honey barbecue is the same pluck with spicy pluck with a little bit of cayenne and then raw honey. So as far as irritants go, if you can handle the garlic, I also have trouble with garlic, but the garlic covers the organ flavor. So if you're not reactive to spices and you can handle that, you're animal based and you're on the go and you're moving, or you're a child and you aren't reactive to all these things, you didn't do a stint in Afghanistan or you didn't do a stint vegan like we did to get messed up. And they're perfectly metabolically healthy. They can handle a little food irritant. Then a little bit of seasoning, if it makes the medicine go down better, that all the better. That was my idea. Get it in the hands of kids, get it in the hands of people who eat more inclusively, and get them to eat more animal product.
Anything we can get to move people away from the cheesy poofs, as you said earlier on, in the Diet Cokes, anything towards nutrient dense food is going to be a win. It's going to be a win. Philip, this has been absolutely fantastic. One of the last questions I have for you is, what is next for you in the Carnivore Bar? What have you guys got planned?
We just did a redesign with our honey barbecue and zesty garlic flavors. My foray crossing the Rubicon into spices and carbs. Very small amounts, but we redesigned our boxes and our colors. And this is some of our favorite constellations, as well as the logo for the Carnivore Bar is based off the Auric painting, cave painting in Lascaux, France, which actually has a little cluster of stars over its left shoulder, which is the Pleiades. So our ancestors were inspired and saw the foods that they ate in the heavens above, and then they painted that inspiration on caves. It's like there are no paintings of broccoli, but there are visions of meat that they imagined they saw in the stars. Like, this is the source of life-giving nutrition, and this is our heritage. And for me, as a carnivore and someone paying an homage to this ancestral food that has existed for thousands of years, I'm trying to get people back to, this modern chronic disease was not caused by an ancestral and ancient food. If we want the health that is our heritage as a human species, like, we have to go back and undo some of our arrogance and our hubris and go to the foods that we were designed to eat.
That's such a great way to end out the podcast, Philip. And I just want to say thank you again, sir, not only for your service, but for taking the time out and being so honorable and creating this wonderful product, the Carnivore Bar, which I am a huge, huge fan of. Nothing tastes as good as being healthy feels, but it's so wonderful to have something that tastes amazing and makes you healthy. So, Philip, where can folks find you and the Carnivore Bar online?
carnivorebar.com. We're active on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks to the boys at Meat Mafia who help us out, shout and spread the good word. Yeah, just find us. We're easily available. We'll happily engage with you. Don't be afraid to direct message us. We're real people. We're a small company, and we really appreciate everything. And thanks you for having me on the podcast.
Philip, it's been my honor, my pleasure. Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate your time. Best of luck to you. I'm going to be in constant touch because as I said, I love this product, and I'm not going to be without it because, like you, I need this in my life daily.
Exactly.
So thank you,
so
sir.
Much.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to the good folks at Carnivore Bar and Equip Foods. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. And also, don't forget you can book me for a 30-minute carnivore coaching session. Again, the link will be in the show notes. Until the next time, be well.